A child in Yemen wakes up to the sound of drones. A family in Ukraine hides in a basement as missiles strike overhead. In Sudan, Ethiopia, Myanmar, people die in conflicts most of the world will never hear about. And yet, we are told this is the most peaceful era in human history. Fewer soldiers die in battles between major powers. Borders seem stable. International law exists on paper. But here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud: there are more active conflicts today than at any point since World War II. War didn't disappear. It multiplied. It adapted. It learned how to kill without making headlines. If humans have spent thousands of years trying to build peace, why does war keep coming back? What if peace isn't humanity's natural state at all, but the exception that only exists under very specific, fragile conditions? And if those conditions are breaking down right now, what comes next? By the end of this documentary, you'll understand why war is almost always here, and why the myth of permanent peace might be the most dangerous illusion humanity has ever believed. Long before borders, flags, or governments, humans were already fighting. Archaeology makes this uncomfortable to ignore. At Jebel Sahaba in present-day Sudan, researchers uncovered a cemetery dating back more than 13,000 years. Over half the skeletons showed signs of violent death, arrowheads embedded in bones, crushed skulls, defensive wounds. This wasn't an isolated clash. It was repeated, organized violence. Similar evidence appears at Nataruk in Kenya, where a group of hunter-gatherers was massacred around 10,000 years ago. Men, women, and children were killed where they stood. No fortifications, no armies, no states. In Central Europe, the Talheim death pit reveals another pattern. A Neolithic farming community wiped out around 5000 BCE. Entire families killed in a single coordinated attack. Anthropologists studying early human societies estimate that 10 to 25% of adult deaths in prehistoric groups were caused by warfare. In some regions, the numbers were even higher. This matters because it dismantles a common assumption. War did not emerge from ideology. It did not require religion, nationalism, or modern politics. It emerged from competition. Small groups depended on land, water, food, and territory. When resources were scarce, survival favored aggression. Groups that defended or expanded territory endured. Those that didn't vanished. Violence wasn't an anomaly, it was a strategy. This leads to a critical reversal of how we usually think about history. War didn't arise because governments failed. Governments arose because war already existed. They were tools to organize violence, control it, and survive it at scale. And that raises the next question. Violence wasn't an anomaly. It was a strategy. And when humans finally learned to organize that violence at scale, to turn tribes into armies, skirmishes into empires, war stopped being about survival. It became about domination. And the first empire to perfect this was Rome. When people talk about peace in the ancient world, they often point to one example, the Pax Romana. For nearly 2 centuries, much of Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East experienced relative stability under Roman rule. Roads were built, trade expanded, cities flourished, but this peace did not come from cooperation. It came from overwhelming force. Rome maintained permanent legions, stationed across its territories, ready to crush rebellion at the first sign of resistance. Taxes flowed from the provinces to the center, funding armies whose sole purpose was to enforce Roman order. When regions resisted, Rome responded without hesitation. In Gaul, Julius Caesar's campaigns killed or enslaved hundreds of thousands. In one campaign alone, Caesar enslaved an estimated 300,000 Gauls. In Britain, Boudicca's rebellion ended with 80,000 Britons dead in a single battle, slaughtered as a lesson to anyone who dared resist. In Britain, revolts like that of Boudicca were met with mass executions and the destruction of entire settlements. In Judea, repeated uprisings ended with Jerusalem's destruction in 70 CE and the scattering of its population. Peace existed, but only after resistance was eliminated. The Pax Romana was not harmony between peoples. It was the absence of resistance under constant threat of violence. This reveals a crucial pattern. Empires can create peace, but only by monopolizing violence so completely that rebellion becomes futile. As long as Rome remained militarily dominant, large-scale war within its borders was rare. But that peace was fragile. It depended on Rome's ability to project power everywhere, all the time. The moment that power weakened, unrest returned, which leads to the next problem. Rome could enforce peace because it stood alone at the top of the system. But what happens when no single empire dominates? When power is divided, balanced, and uncertain? Because that is where modern war truly begins. Rome's peace worked because power was concentrated. Once that concentration collapsed, war returned. Early modern Europe tried a different solution. In 1648, the Treaty of Westphalia ended decades of religious warfare by introducing a new idea: sovereign states, recognized borders, and rules meant to prevent constant conflict. No empire, no universal authority. Instead, a system where power would be balanced. The theory was simple. If no single state could dominate, none would risk war. In practice, the opposite happened. Balanced power created permanent paranoia. Every army expansion was met with counter-expansion. Every alliance triggered a counter-alliance. Diplomats spent decades negotiating treaties. That only delayed the next war. And when war finally came in 1914, it killed 20 million people in 4 years, the deadliest conflict humanity had ever seen. Every state watched its neighbors closely. Every military reform triggered counter-reforms. Standing armies expanded. Navies grew. Alliances hardened. Diplomacy didn't eliminate war. It delayed it while making it larger. The 18th century saw near constant conflict across Europe. The War of Spanish Succession, the 7 Years' War, endless coalition fighting. Each conflict ended with treaties promising stability. Each one quietly set the stage for the next. By the late 18th century, this system collapsed into the Napoleonic Wars, total mobilization on a continental scale. And after Napoleon fell, Europe doubled down on balance once again. The result was 1914. World War I was not an accident. It was the logical outcome of decades of arms races, alliance obligations, and strategic paranoia. A system designed to preserve peace instead guaranteed that when war came, it would be catastrophic. Which answers the next question clearly. Rules and diplomacy can delay conflict. They cannot remove the fear that fuels it. And once war becomes too destructive to survive directly, societies look for another solution. One built not on balance but on deterrence. Because after 1945, war didn't disappear. It became too dangerous to fight openly. World War I showed what balance of power systems could unleash. World War II showed something worse. By 1945, industrial war had reached a scale that threatened civilization itself. Tens of millions were dead. Cities were erased. And for the first time, humanity possessed weapons capable of ending everything. This changed the logic of war, but it did not end it. The Cold War introduced a new form of stability: nuclear deterrence. The United States and the Soviet Union both understood that direct war would mean mutual destruction. This doctrine, later called mutually assured destruction or MAD, made total war irrational. As a result, major powers stopped fighting each other directly. This is why the post-1945 era often appears peaceful, especially from inside Europe and North America. But that peace was selective. While nuclear-armed states avoided direct confrontation, war didn't disappear. It was outsourced. Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Angola, Central America, the Middle East, While nuclear-armed states avoided direct confrontation, war didn't disappear. It was outsourced. Korea, 3 million dead. Vietnam, 3 million dead. Afghanistan, Soviet, 1 million dead. Angola, 500,000 dead. Peace for some, hell for millions. These conflicts were fought with weapons, money, and influence supplied by larger powers, but paid for in local blood. Millions died in wars officially framed as containment, liberation, or defense. The system worked if survival of major powers was the only goal. Peace, in this context, was not the absence of war. It was the management of where war was allowed to happen. Which answers a crucial question. Major wars stopped not because humanity rejected violence, but because fear made direct conflict too costly. Peace didn't win. Fear did, but fear is a fragile foundation. And when new technologies reduce the cost of conflict, when war no longer risks immediate annihilation, the old restraints begin to weaken, which brings us to the present. Because war did not disappear after the Cold War ended, it learned how to fight without triggering catastrophe. When the Cold War ended, many believed war had finally been defeated. What actually happened was quieter and more dangerous. War changed its shape. Direct confrontation between major powers remained too risky. Nuclear deterrence still worked, but new tools made it possible to damage rivals without crossing the line into open war. This is what military analysts now call hybrid warfare. Cyber attacks disable power grids and hospitals. Sanctions collapse economies without firing a shot. Disinformation fractures societies from within. Proxy forces fight battles that governments officially deny involvement in. In 2007, Estonia's government networks were crippled by cyber attacks. No troops crossed a border, but a nation was effectively attacked. In 2014 and again in 2022, Ukraine became the clearest example of modern war's full spectrum. Conventional invasion combined with cyber operations, economic pressure, information warfare, and energy coercion. Even outside active battlefields, war continues quietly. Sanctions imposed on Iran, Russia, and other states have reshaped economies, disrupted supply chains, and affected civilian populations on a massive scale. These actions are not labeled war, but they serve strategic goals once achieved only through violence. This is conflict below the threshold of war. It explains why war feels invisible today. There are no declarations, no clear beginnings, no obvious endings. And yet, real damage is being done, daily. War adapted because the old rules made it too costly, so it learned how to operate without triggering retaliation. Which brings us to the final problem. If war now hides inside economies, networks, and information systems, what actually makes peace possible anymore? Because if peace depends on systems, not intentions, then we need to understand when and why those systems hold, and when they fail. If war is humanity's default, then peace becomes the exception. But exceptions do exist. History shows that peace can emerge, not through goodwill or shared values, but through specific power arrangements. The Pax Romana is one example. Large-scale war inside Roman territory was rare for generations, not because conflict vanished, but because Rome's military dominance made resistance futile. Peace was enforced. The Cold War offers another example. After 1945, direct war between major powers stopped, not due to trust, but because nuclear weapons made escalation suicidal. Deterrence worked by creating fear so overwhelming that war became irrational. And then there is post-war Europe. After centuries of near-constant conflict, Western Europe experienced unprecedented stability following World War II. This peace did not arise spontaneously. It was built through institutions, NATO, economic integration, shared markets, and security guarantees backed by American power. In each case, peace depended on structure, a dominant force, a balance held in place by fear, institutions capable of enforcing rules. What these examples share is not harmony, but constraint. Peace emerged when the cost of violence became higher than the benefit, not morally, strategically. This answers an important question. Peace is achievable, but only under strict conditions, and only while those conditions remain intact, which raises the most fragile part of the equation. What happens when dominance fades, when deterrence weakens, when institutions lose credibility? Because peace does not collapse suddenly, it erodes. And once erosion begins, history suggests it rarely reverses quietly. That brings us to the mechanism that breaks peace apart, again and again. Every case we've examined follows the same pattern. Peace appears, stability holds, and then, slowly, it unravels. Not because people suddenly choose violence, but because the conditions that made peace possible begin to change. The first trigger is power shifts. Rome expanded until it could no longer control its borders. European balance of power systems collapsed when rising states outpaced old restraints. The Cold War held until economic and political pressures dissolved one side entirely. Peace depends on predictability. When power shifts, fear returns. The second pressure is resources. Land, food, energy, water. Scarcity turns competition into conflict. From prehistoric tribes to industrial empires, wars consistently follow moments when resources become constrained or unevenly distributed. The third force is demography. Population growth, migration, and urban pressure strain political systems. Young populations without opportunity have historically correlated with unrest, rebellion, and war. This pattern appears repeatedly, from revolutionary Europe to modern fragile states. Then comes technology. Every major shift, iron weapons, gunpowder, industrial arms, nuclear bombs, cyber tools, reshapes the cost of violence. When technology lowers the perceived risk of conflict, restraint collapses. This is why peace never lasts indefinitely. Systems evolve faster than institutions can adapt. The incentives change before the rules do. Peace is not broken by malice. It is broken by mismatch between power, resources, population, and technology, which leads to the final realization. Peace is not a destination humanity reaches once. It is a temporary condition that must constantly be rebuilt in a world that never stops changing. And that brings us to the truth behind the myth of peace itself. By now, a pattern should be impossible to ignore. Across prehistory, empires, nation-states, nuclear standoffs, and modern hybrid conflicts, peace has appeared again and again, but only briefly, and never without force behind it. This is where the myth begins. The myth is not that peace is unattainable. History proves that peace can exist, but it only exists under narrow, fragile conditions. What history does not support is the idea that peace is permanent or self-sustaining. In every era, peace has been treated as a destination, something humanity reaches once progress is sufficient, once institutions are strong enough, once systems are modern enough. But history shows something else entirely. Peace is not the natural state of human society. War is. Conflict emerges whenever the structures restraining violence weaken, when power shifts, resources tighten, populations strain, or technology changes faster than rules can adapt. This does not mean humanity is uniquely violent. It means competition, fear, and survival are constant pressures that never disappear. Peace, in contrast, requires continuous effort, enforcement, maintenance, adjustment. When societies forget this, when peace is assumed rather than defended, it begins to erode quietly. This is why war rarely feels sudden when it arrives. The conditions that produce it have usually been forming for years. The real myth of peace is not believing it's possible, The myth is believing we've earned it permanently, that progress is a one-way street, that institutions are immortal, that our generation is somehow exempt from the violence that defined every generation before us. We're not. We never were. And once that myth takes hold, history shows what follows, which leaves one final question. If peace is fragile, conditional, and temporary, what does that mean for the world we live in now? The danger is not that war exists. The danger is that many societies believe it no longer applies to them. History shows that peace rarely collapses in a single moment. It fades quietly, while institutions weaken, incentives shift, and conflicts become easier to ignore. Modern societies are especially vulnerable to this illusion. War today does not always arrive with invasions or declarations. It appears through economic pressure, cyber disruption, proxy violence, and information warfare, often without ever being called war at all. This makes complacency easy. Conflicts remain distant. Costs are hidden. Responsibility feels abstract. But the conditions that once held peace together, stable power balances, credible deterrence, functioning institutions, are not fixed. They change, they erode, they fail. And when they do, history suggests violence does not need to be invented again. It simply returns to the surface. The lesson of this documentary is not that war is inevitable. It is that peace is conditional. It survives only when people recognize how fragile it is, when power is constrained, when fear is managed, when conflict is acknowledged instead of ignored. Peace does not persist because humanity has outgrown war. It persists only while the systems restraining war remain intact, and history offers no guarantee that they will. So the final question is not whether peace is possible. It is this. So here's the truth nobody wants to hear. Peace isn't won once and kept forever. It's rebuilt every generation, or it dies. And right now, in 2025, the conditions that held peace together for 80 years are fracturing. Power is shifting. Resources are tightening. Technology is outpacing institutions. The question isn't if war returns, it's where and when, and whether we'll recognize it before it's too late. Because the myth of peace isn't that it's impossible. The myth is that we think we've outgrown it.